y hoy nos va a platicar un poco de su vida. ¿Cómo fue la vida, cómo ha sido la vida de un científico destacado como él? ¿Cuáles fueron decisiones claves, apoyos claves que él tuvo en su vida? Y aquellas cosas que a ustedes les inquieten. Vamos a iniciar con una breve intervención de él, explicándonos un poco de su vida. Y para facilitar un poco los diálogos, nos acompaña la doctora Patricia Chombo, investigadora del CIATEG, un centro de investigación con CONACYT hermano, aquí de la ciudad. La doctora María del Refugio Torres Vitela, jefa del Departamento de Farmacobiología, y la maestra Susana Guerra, coordinadora de la licenciatura en Químico Farmacéutico Biólogo. Entonces, esperemos que dialoguemos mucho, que nos imaginemos cómo ha sido la vida, una vida muy interesante, llena de logros, del doctor Wilhelm, y que le preguntemos mucho para aprender un poco de sus logros y quizás de algunas disyuntivas que él tuvo en algún momento de su vida, cuando joven, cuando ya no tan joven. Entonces, pues, doctor Wilhelm, thank you very much for your contribution to the young people of Cusey. So,
all yours.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Yeah. Buenas tardes. But I'm sorry, my Spanish is too limited. Poco. So anyway, yeah, it's a great privilege for me to be here, and I want to thank the organizers, especially also the people who made it possible for me to come here, Dr. Torres and Dr. Blanco, for everything they did to make it possible, and all the other people that are here, also Dr. Patricia, we have contact for many years now, and I think she initiated a lot of this visit here, and I'm also very grateful for her. Yeah. I didn't know I have to introduce myself again. But yes, because yesterday I gave some background about my youth and then my studies. So I don't know how can I summarize. I don't want to make a long story. I'll try to concentrate. You know, when I was in high school, maybe first of all, I think my interest in nature was also determined by the environment where I grew up. And that was in the Western Cape in Ceres. There's a village. There's the name for fruitfulness because it is between the mountains, very fruitful valley, and I also wandered in the mountains and was interested in the flowers and the plants and things. And then I later, in my final year before I had to went to university, I wanted actually to go and study maybe forestry because I wanted to work with plants. And then I also loved music, so I wanted to study music. So two quite contrary interests. And my father told me I can always enjoy music even if you are a scientist. So maybe it was a good choice. Music not good for a man, maybe, I'm not sure. But I still enjoy music even when I work and maybe write papers or study, then I can listen to good music, you know. So it's stimulating. I love Bach music and Baroque especially, so it is very stimulating for even thinking, opening your mind. So anyway, yeah, and then finally I decided, because of the scholarship, I got to go and study agriculture actually. And when I look back on my career, I can see really it's not a straight road to where I'm today. You can maybe say that is like a zigzag, but finally it moved towards one goal or one point of, I would say, concentration where I became a microbiologist for many years. And so I'm grateful many people were on my career on the road to where I'm today. I had very good professors that were also advisors to me. They said it's not a good idea just to study general agriculture. You have to focus maybe on food science. Then I became more interested in microbiology, and finally my focus became microbiologist. But the point is actually that I had a I think I will take this off, then otherwise I compete with I think when I look back, it was very, very beneficial that I had a broad basis as a microbiologist to understand food processing. I mean, I can make cheese, I can make sausage, salami, all these things, because I had a background, but I went into basic, in taxonomy of bacteria, and then finally lactic acid bacteria. But it's good to understand basics. If you talk about anything like where I'm today, we focus on the intestinal tract, the gut microbiome. But it's an ecosystem, and you see certain things in an ecological way. So if you look at the food ecosystem, it's always a dynamic condition you have with many bacteria, many factors involved there. And from there, you can understand also many other ecosystems, like when you go to more complex situations, like in the intestinal tract, especially in the colon, it becomes extremely complex. And we just on the, I would say, on the periphery, I showed an iceberg yesterday, but I think it's even much more. You do not know what's below the water. And so we're increasing our knowledge, but also thanks to development in new technologies. You know, we have all test kits today. It's so easy to just use a test kit and without, you know, really knowing the basics behind it. And well, maybe to make a long story short, I think it's very important that we don't take anything for granted. Just we benefit from many technical advances today. But sometimes we forget just to look at the real things happening as they interact. And one thing as a microbiologist, I keep on telling my students, you cannot be a good microbiologist without using a microscope. Because many times we think, okay, we have all these you know, the primers, you can just probe, you can just, you know, and then we can be very exact. But sometimes you can end up with a mixed culture, contaminated culture. And you need, from the basics, again, go back to pure culture techniques. And every time when you do an experiment, make sure you work with a pure culture. This is just now mentioning microbiology. And so in many ways, you need to look at things, I would say, and remain humble. Because if you think we know everything, because we have so many modern techniques and technologies, and we can do everything. If you look at the best scientific papers, you can look in Nature or Science or any other high-standing scientific journal. The papers, for me, the best papers are always those who open new questions. That means they say, okay, we know this, but we still don't know the mechanism behind it, or we don't know the details of the mechanism. And I think this is what I would give as a message to you. One of the messages is that it is a wonderful time in which you learn. What you can do today as young scientists, we could only dream of 20 years or 30 years ago. Today is possible. But it's always good to link it with the basics, because also ask behind the answer you find, what is the mechanisms about it, mechanistic sense. Or how do things work together in this complex situation where we have many, many factors involved. Not only microorganisms interacting. I mentioned this today in the other talk about quorum sensing, or what we call crosstalk and auto-inducer too, and so on. So there's always the crosstalk, and now we have also the talk of the bacteria in our intestinal tract with our brain. We call it the gut-brain axis. And they have discovered that the bacteria in our intestinal tract have a stronger impact on our emotions than many other factors. Our cognitive functions or emotions are determined on the stability of the gut and the homeostasis we have in the intestinal tract. So even there but this is just the beginning of understanding more and more of these interactions. And maybe it's enough for my career. I mean, I went through many stations in my career. I was teaching at the University of Pretoria for 15 years in microbiology, had many graduate students there, and also focused more deep on the lactic acid bacteria, the ecology. One of my graduate students, her husband, was actually a botanist. So they went into the whole country and collected botanical samples from plants, but she collected bacterial samples from the plants. So from that time I was so interested because she had hundreds of bacteria that were isolated from plants with different kinds of properties, different features and so on, which became a very interesting field of study for me. So I think it's a never-ending story if we go into the environment. And we talked about this morning about traditional fermented foods. So in Mexico, I think you have many regions where you have old traditions of traditional fermented foods, where you can study bacteria and isolate maybe new strains which are maybe interesting for application later, study their different characteristics with the modern techniques you have today. And I think one thing is important, and I mentioned this morning, that we live in a world of modernization, and there's an increasing process of urbanization. We had many projects in Africa, and there we could see the process of urbanization, which causes a loss in the old culture of the people, where they know to process particular foods, and they know from the older generation how to do it. It was passed on, but when the younger people move to the cities, they forget a lot of the old traditions, and they don't know exactly how to do the processing of particular food. This is just one example. There might be many other cultural examples which might be lost over 1 or 2 generations. So I think there's also a great challenge for young scientists. And the fact is, as I said, when you read scientific papers and you always see new questions coming up, that is a wonderful promise for your future, because you will never run out of work. There will be enough work for the future for interested scientists for research in the future. So, and yeah, what else can I say from what I learned? You know, I'm a bit older than most people here. One thing I learned is that I would say be curious, and you can be critical, but never be skeptical. Because skeptical means you're already negative, and that is negative. So I would say curious and critical, but with the right attitude of your heart. If your heart is okay, then you can ask a question because you are really interested in the question, and not to maybe downgrade the person or be negative in that sense. I mean, this is one thing I learned in life. Maybe I can just pass it on to you. And always be curious. And I think that many things you know by yourself, but I think the moment when you become curious and interested, even if it's a difficult issue, the challenge is so more interesting to take, and you can better succeed. It becomes more easy. I mean, you know it from your own studies. If you don't like it, you hate it, it becomes difficult. So, just one thing.
Okay.
Preguntas. Se abre foro.
Okay.
I have questions.
Okay.
Well, I speak English if you want to take it up.
Just one thing.
Yeah. Good afternoon. It's an honor for me to be here and having this talk with you. I think I'm speaking for the rest of my group, and I would like to ask, what does inspire you to share the knowledge you have learned with the population or with the scientific community? What does inspire you? Why do you do this for?
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I hope I can give you the right answer. You know, when my wife, many times she asks me why I don't just retire and sit back, you know. But I feel I will be so frustrated. And I think that the greatest reward one can get when you come in the later years of your career is to continue as much as you can. Because with the information and knowledge and the deeper insights we get, and to be honest, I'm still learning. but that's why I like it, because I have to keep up with my students, and I mean every week we have our journal club. So I'm listening because they study in different specializations in our field, and so we share the information that comes through literature, and this makes me also excited, but I have to listen very carefully to keep up and remain in a basis of communication and exchange with them. So this one side is the challenge I have to keep on, but also I'm so interested to know more, because today we can learn or study things which we couldn't do 20 years ago. Because all the new approaches, the techniques, I just mentioned yesterday, we have a wonderful grant from the Korean government by which we could establish a germ-free animal section. By this, now we can study particular strains in their interaction with the body on a single strain level. Hardly you can study bacteria, how they interact with the body only on a level of one single strain. And germ-free sections are not many. And so I feel very privileged that we can do it. The other thing is, I mentioned yesterday, is that it's a wonderful privilege to invest in young people. When I look at you, and as many times I tell to my classes also, I've got undergraduate classes, I've graduate classes. It's exciting to teach them. The main thing is not only just the knowledge, but to actually appeal to them in terms of, I think, looking at your own heart and looking at your attitude and how you see yourself in your community, in your society, in the world. Because every one of you, I told you yesterday, you have a fingerprint that's unique. So every one of you are unique. And that tells you you can contribute something that nobody else can do. Sometimes you say, oh, nobody's indispensable. Well, it may be so, but the fact that you are here makes the difference. And what I like is to remind the young people, you are the leaders of tomorrow. And with my little contribution I can make, if I can contribute a little bit to the leaders of tomorrow, to prepare them for the challenges ahead, it's a wonderful privilege. And that's why I think it's so wonderful we can share and we can talk with each other. And when I look about my life, I mean, I did never plan to be in Mexico one day like now. And even growing and loving the country more and more and have wonderful friends here. I never planned it, but for my person, I can just show you, I believe God has a plan for my life. That is my conviction. And I can see a perfect plan coming to fulfillment. I don't know about the future. I made mistakes in the past, but the past is history. So, and this is one thing I also learned. Never let the past be a burden on your shoulders, because you cannot change the past. This is history. Today is the most important day of your life. My father, many times, he told me, remember, today is the most important time of your life. And it's the first day of the rest of your life. But you will know that. So, do the best for today, and then tomorrow will be better if you do the best for today. And once again, coming back to your question, I told my students many times, you know, it's not for me to strive to be better and so on. What does it help? What can you take with you after this? You know, the most important thing is, and I tell it many times to my students, I would love to see you pass me left and right. That is what I'm there for, and I see that also. If I see my young colleagues now and students from a PhD, what they can do today, they understand deeper. Well, that is the purpose of everything. And I enjoy to see this, and I'm part of it. So that is a great privilege.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, it's an honor to have you here in Mexico. My question would be...
In English, okay.
My question
yeah.
how do you transition from being a student to being an investigator?
Can you repeat our transition?
Sure.
From?
How do you transition from being a student to an investigator?
From a student to an investigator.
Yeah.
How was the transition?
A researcher.
Yeah.
Well, I think I remained both. So there was no transition. In fact, in my younger years of teaching, I was quite a young guy when I started teaching at the University of Pretoria. It was a new challenge for me, but all the time I found that the teaching became more rich and more, I would say, more deep if I have research to back it up. I don't need to do research on all fields I teach on, but it makes me more, I would say, alert to look deeper into things which you just read in the textbooks. But the textbooks, many times they don't tell me many deeper things, in which I want to explain, and by doing research, I develop inquisitive mind. Because if you find some phenomenon or some reaction in the lab, you want to understand why, how does it happen? And the textbook might just summarize these things. So in the way in which you are a teacher, I think you can become more mature as a teacher if you do more, I would say, inquisitive research. You are asking more deeper questions. And in this way, I think you can communicate even better with your students. But this is my feeling. I never, I think, thought I changed from a student to a researcher. I think I remain a student even till today. And in this way, I can teach and also share.
Sí, sí.
Let me get a microphone.
Okay. Let me get them for you.
They are also good in English. Well.
In all this process of your life, I wanted to ask you, which values do you think are the most important to have with other persons, with the society?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this is a basic question for each person. And I'm still, thinking about these questions of life, because the biggest question of life is actually, who am I? You're not only what your fingerprint tells you, not only what your mind, because our mind is changing all the time, our emotions and so on. But I think it's important, well, who am I? Where do I go? What is my path in this life? And where I come from also. And my destination, because our life is not permanent on this earth, but we have to know where we're going in the future, after this life. And this is for me most important, to prepare and be ready for the future, beyond this life. And the other thing is, in terms of my life, I think if you think of the values of life, I think the family is very important. I'm very grateful for my family. And in spite of my own mistakes, I make many mistakes. And okay, when you don't make mistakes, you cannot make corrections, So even in science, this is what I want to tell you. If you make a mistake in the laboratory, you know what the final thing I said yesterday, never give up. And I found it many times with students, they were sometimes so depressed.
No.
Yeah, knowing, when I make mistakes and the experiment doesn't work. And then they go back to the working bench and they try it again. And then they learn more and they come mature out of it, or more mature. So it's a learning process. I start now, okay, again, the family is very important. We are given to each other. And from the family, your community, how you can serve each other. And then wider in your country and in worldwide, because I think we all need each other today, more than ever before. And we can, I saw so many wonderful examples. I worked with many people in Africa, many regions in Africa. We became friends, Ethiopia, Kenya, West Africa, Ghana, and so on. Until today, friends, wonderful friends. And I saw also that for those people with a stable situation, they have good relationships in their family also. And also you can exchange in a much better way if you have a stable background. I know many people come from disrupted homes, and they need also support and understanding, So, in terms of the future, I think the challenges are to understand the challenges are coming for the future. Some people might say it's a climate crisis. I personally don't think so, but that's my personal idea. Because the carbon dioxide is not a greenhouse gas. That's in my feeling. There are many, many more dangerous things in life. But we have to study more. We have also a photosynthetic lab. If you increase the lab, the CO2, the photosynthetic organisms, they will just make more biomass. Obviously, there's a limit in which we can pollute, and I'm more concerned about pollution. today. Plastics. You know, if we live near the beach in South Korea, and when you see some after a storm, after a recent typhoon, incredible amount of plastics are washed out, day by day. And where do they come from? And is there a way in which we can rid of the plastics? Maybe that is one of the research areas. I would say it's a great challenge, maybe for chemists or whatever. And then in terms of climate change, I don't think we can change the climate back. It is an issue. And we have to know there's an increase in desertification, like the Gobi Desert, the Sahara Desert is increasing, and societies are disrupted because of this. So we need to take care of that and know there are changes. But I'm not sure if we can change back the climate. We should reduce the pollution. And I mean, there are many scientific reasons why I say this, but I'm not going into this. This is not really my field. But I think we need, and this is one message I want to give to you, to be ready for the future, for the challenges are coming up. And you know, in our society, I know it from Europe, there are very, very few leaders to which the young people can look up, from whom they have respect. Very few leaders in the general society, in politics, wherever. We need leaders that the young people respect, and that they will have as a blueprint and as example, as a, what you can say, to follow in the future. And I think this is for you as a challenge. You will be leaders of tomorrow. Prepare yourself to lead other people, you know, for inspiring them, taking up the challenge day by day.
Thank you.
I would like to know what kind of motivations you have had, or you already have.
What kind of?
What kind of motivations you have had, or already have?
What motivations
Motivation.
do you have?
Motivations.
Or had motivation.
Or?
Right now, or
Or in the past.
Or right back also.
Yeah.
Motivation. Yeah, I think I shared part of it with you, the fact that my history was, I grew up in kind of in nature. And I visited many farms and in the mountains, and you know, I just loved the nature. And this gave me a motivation to devote also my studies in this direction, you know. And I said the other motivation was actually the music, which I love, and which I wanted to study, but I still love music, but I needed to study it. So I think the motivation is, first, I would say, as I said, I know, and I'm 100% sure God has a perfect plan for each of you, so for my life. But to be sure what you want to do, you have always to investigate your heart. And always we have a mind given to us to make decisions. And always we can say yes or no to something. And sometimes we have the opportunity, when we make a mistake, we can correct and go back. So in my life, my motivation was actually to go deeper into the bioscience, biology. Love nature. I had the more romantic dream, maybe of doing something in nature. And always be outside. I love to be outside. That led to microbiology, and I'm always inside now, most of the time. But it was a step-by-step process, based on the early motivation to interact with nature. And in biology or in microbiology, you can still interact with nature, but you can do it in the laboratory. And also have a deeper understanding of how life functions on a cellular level. And see the complexity of each cell and how they function as a machine and these things. This is continuing process of motivation for me, to know more and more of how a single cell functions. I think the best laboratories in the world, maybe I can just tell you that if you ask any person, top scientist in the world, what is life? I don't know if I've ever heard a perfect answer for it. We can describe life, how we observe it. You know, what they do, I mean, what is life? It's a living cell. The cell can make a copy of itself, maybe within 1 hour, by functioning as a machine with all the transcription, all these different steps. You describe it. You can actually, you know, find a way of let's say, defining all the different steps. But how do you define life as such. So this is something that is still intriguing for me, to define life. You can have chemically the same cell, one is dead, one is living. What is the difference? Only by observing the difference in its behavior, but still life is not perfectly explained that. I hope I could understand, could answer your question. Okay.
Very good, thank you.
One more.
Now that you have stated about never give up, I would like to know what would you recommend to someone who's starting in research to not give up? What do you recommend? Let's imagine, for example, if I think many of us would like to begin in the field of investigation. So what would you recommend us to not give up?
Well, I think first of all you need to be motivated. If you are motivated, you are also, I would say, strengthened in your inspiring or in aspiring something and achieving something. If you are not motivated, maybe you will give up before the time. So I think motivation is the first thing. And then also to be curious about what you are motivated about, you know, to inquisitive. Want to know more and deeper and deeper and deeper. So I think it's a whole process for yourself. So I would never recommend anybody to choose a topic for research which you don't like at all. So first of all is the selection of what you are going to do. The next thing is to be curious enough to even continue in spite of drawbacks and maybe some disappointments. But then it challenges you, and this is one way, by the way, in which I learned a lot in life. When I had drawbacks, when I had disappointments, when I had maybe sometimes mistakes in the lab, then I had to go back and see where I made the mistake. And after that, I knew much more. So maybe I hope this can help you in this.
Yeah, of course, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
What do you feel when you are investigating?
Yeah, this is a question I cannot answer as I would have done in maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Because at the moment I'm not investigated really so much myself. Because I just help and guide the students in doing the work, you know. But one thing I still do, and I like it very much, is to do microscopy with my students. Because microscopy for microbiologists, for myself at least, is still very important. And I like to see the bacteria in front of me using phase contrast microscopy to see how they look really, not the stained specimens, but really phase contrast to see how they look, the morphology, everything. Then the other thing is look at the plates in microbiology, look at the different colony types and so on. These are all still important because it gives you a first impression of what you are dealing with. And not just going, oh, you pick a colony and you do the 16S RNA sequencing. What does it tell you? It tells you a name, you don't know what it does, how it interacts, how it looks like even sometimes. If you are in a hurry, you know, they're quick and they're good. Yeah. So this, I mean, to make it a long story short, I think this is still exciting for me, to deal with the real things going on in the lab.
Thank you.
There's another question
Over there.
Where? Here.
Yeah, I will be here. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi.
Before I faint, I will take.
Yes.
So we've recently seen in the news a lot about the antibiotics crisis. What's your take on the near future crisis?
Yeah, that's a very good question because, and you know, many times mankind, we make our own problems. You know, I mean, our pollution, everything, and antibiotics or antibiotic resistance, or I would say accumulating antibiotics, is just a result of maybe the wrong use of antibiotics or overuse or even not considering the consequences when you use antibiotics. Personally, I would not like to use antibiotics if it's not at all necessary, if it's not a really desperate situation. But what we see today, maybe I can start from the environment. You know, a few years ago I had to give a talk about the environment, so on, and I looked at literature about pollution in surface waters, lakes, rivers, even into the sea. And I was shocked to see that you will all over the earth, or most of the surface waters are also already contaminated with antibiotic residues. It comes from the hospitals and then obviously through the patients, because part of it you will also excrete, come into the environment. So you have a selective factor which can determine the buildup of resistant bacteria. And well, we all know that, I mean, the moment when we use antibiotics, you have a selective pressure against the normal population of the intestinal tract, for instance, and you have a selected in favor of resistant bacteria. And many of these resistant bacteria are not safe for us. Some of them may not be dangerous, but some of them, if they have maybe a mobile element that can be passed on, like a plasmid or so, then you have maybe a horizontal or even vertical transfer of antibiotic resistance. And I think this is the most dangerous issue of today, is the transfer of, or transferable antibiotic resistance. And that's why we come up, nosocomial pathogens, nosocomial situations where you have maybe infections of Staphylococcus aureus, the MRSA, or Enterococcus, the VRE, the vancomycin resistant Enterococcus. In these cases, we have a build-up because of selective pressure in the environment, which is mainly the hospital. It can happen many times that the patient with a minor surgery might become infected in a hospital with one of these nosocomial pathogens, and can get sick or infected, and even could die because of the infection. So, for my feeling, I mean, always be looking for next generation antibiotics, to wipe out maybe MRSA and so on. But I think the best is the prevention of the overuse of antibiotics, and to see that it's not used in animal feeds as additives. I think it's maybe also forbidden now in Mexico. In Europe, it's not allowed anymore. Even derivatives that are similar to what we use in pharmaceutics. So, yeah, and I'm very much in favor of looking for alternatives to antibiotics. That means those kind of drugs that can still be developed without causing secondary resistance. That means alternatives which can do the same job, but maybe we are not far enough there. I think of one example, and I want to say we should use this in clinical fighting of pathogens, but bactericins, I don't know if you know about bactericins.
Yeah.
It's the antimicrobial proteinaceous substance that are active against closely related organs. The first one actually the colicins, long before the lactic acid bacteria. So, but the bactericins can be very interesting, and they've shown that they can even kill pathogenic bacteria, like maybe Listeria or whatever, by lactic acid bacteria, without having the same side effects as antibiotics. So this is the one approach we can take. There's also what they call maybe the phage therapy, that is bacteriophages that can be directed against a particular pathogen. That has no side effects on humans, for instance. So I think there are many alternatives that are wonderful challenges for young scientists like you, to go for other pathways than just always finding new and new generation antibiotics. So I hope we could give you some answer there.
Preventive medicine.
Preventive.
No sé si quieran los demás.
Bien.
¿Sí? Ah, aquí.
Preguntar.
Ya tienen una pregunta.
Okay.
Puedes preguntar en español también.
Hola.
Ahora sí.
Bueno, es un placer y pues creo que un milagro tal vez también que esté aquí. Porque, no sé, tuve una experiencia algo, no sé, esotérica, no sé cómo explicarlo. como se me presentó como una visión, un flashback, no sé, fue un llanto y liberador a la vez cuando sentí eso. Esto me pasó apenas el 21 de octubre y fue como cuando sentí el propósito de mi vida, pero fue a base de que escuché mi corazón, mi cuerpo, mi mente, porque mi mente se encontraba en un conflicto, o sea, todo el tiempo estaba sintiendo mis pensamientos en conflicto y no sabía qué hacer, cómo sentirme mejor, pero también se empezaron a manifestar cosas en mi cuerpo que ningún médico podía decirme qué era, o sea, me daban tratamiento y empeoró un poquito más, no sé. Entonces, pues yo solamente le hice caso a mis pensamientos y no, por alguna razón no presentaba dolor. O sea, tengo un problema de que no sé, tengo el umbral del dolor muy alto y fue un choque en mi cabeza, como si hubieran llegado tantas ideas, tanto todo lo que he vivido en ese momento, en ese justo momento. Y fue justo cuando me estaba quedando dormido y sentí como un llamado al fondo de la tele. Mi roomie estaba viendo televisión y escuché una voz desde el fondo: levántate y ponte a hacer lo que tienes que hacer. Entonces me levanté, puse a escribir lo que sentía y en ese momento fue como si hubiera sentido una revelación para mí mismo. Y como de alguna manera a mí me ha gustado la astrología también, me ha gustado ver las estrellas, pues me dio más curiosidad si esto era casual o si puede darle una repetición, que se hubieran repetido tantos patrones para darme yo cuenta de eso. Entonces yo me di cuenta que también mi signo Libra estaba alineado con Venus, como con la mujer, y yo cuando me di cuenta de eso fue cuando liberé yo mi amor hacia todos, o sea, un amor incondicional a todos y una admiración a todo completamente todo. Entonces para mí fue como si Dios, el universo, las leyes físicas, las leyes de convivencia, todo se hubiera presentado en ese momento para mí, como un sentido, como si me hubiera iluminado algo. Entonces empecé a asociar todos los patrones, todo lo que se me había repetido. De alguna manera yo sentí que tenía que mirar hacia atrás, hacia mi madre, hacia todas las personas. Entonces yo dije, ¿qué debo hacer? Entonces entendí que era el tiempo, que yo no estaba haciendo lo que estaba haciendo porque no decidía en ese momento. Entonces empecé a decidir en ese momento y se me presentó por coincidencia un doctor de Tepa que se llama Dr. Sánchez. Tiene autismo y tiene autismo grado Asperger. Tiene 2 bases federales. Aquí es muy raro. Trabaja en Tepa, en el hospital regional, creo, o en el seguro, y también aquí en Guadalajara. Pero él tiene una cura que se llama autohemoterapia y pues no es muy conocida. Entonces él aplica ese tratamiento en Tepa y es como una contrallave inmunológica con tu misma sangre y con solución salina, pero se hace como un humming inmunológico y pues no es un fármaco, no es una droga, es tu misma sangre como reacomodándose. Entonces yo vi a través de toda la cultura, o sea, me gusta mucho la cultura, aprender. También tuve como mi vida, o sea, no sabía hacia qué decidir, qué hacer, porque fue también como un árbol, o sea, puede ser como el árbol de la vida. Entonces empecé a entender como las dimensiones en las que estaba y de alguna manera algo me decía que volteara hacia adelante, hacia arriba y hacia abajo, o sea, es lo mismo arriba y abajo para mí. Y de alguna manera también entendí el simbolismo de las señales o de los nombres que se presentan a través de grandes pensadores, y yo no sabía cómo explicar todo esto que sentí en un momento, en un ratito, fue no sé cuántos segundos, salí y me acordé en ese momento, o sea, dejé de llorar en ese momento y me acordé que tenía que ponerme mis ligas y todo en los brackets, y volteo a verme en el espejo y veo mis pupilas súper dilatadas. Entonces yo no sabía qué estaba pasando, porque mis pupilas estaban muy dilatadas, como si estuviera en un estado de trance. Pero esa cura de la autometerapia, no sé cómo hacerla que se haga conocida, porque hay estudios que se ha demostrado que es la cura autoinmunológica de nuestro mismo cuerpo. O sea, con la solución salina y la sangre, o sea, la sangre está como a 37 grados, pero se tiene que bajar la temperatura a 5 grados con solución salina para que los anticuerpos en frío generen una contrallave perfecta de genética Entonces, sería como la cura para ti mismo de mi enfermedad. Pero yo me di cuenta también de esto al prestar atención a mis signos. O sea, empezó a empeorar mi estado de salud y ahorita, no sé, no puedo explicar qué, pero ya estoy otra vez, veo mi cuerpo sano. O sea, ya no tenía diarrea, o sea, intermitente, o sea, todo el tiempo. Me hice un análisis coprológico, salió negativo. Me picó un zancudo y pensé que era el Zika, que diga el dengue o lo que sea, y dije, me asusté, empezó un rash atípico en mi cuerpo y yo no sabía qué estaba pasando y nomás me sentía como un montón de alfileres clavados alrededor de mi cuerpo, pero me daba una desesperación y después se quitaba. Entonces fui al médico, al cardiólogo, y él también me habló de ese mismo médico, del doctor Sánchez. Entonces a mí se me hace muy raro porque un doctor con autismo grado Asperger tiene ese tratamiento, pero a él se lo pasó otro doctor mexicano, el doctor Jorge González Ramírez, y pues desgraciadamente él murió, o como dice el doctor que tiene autismo, dice que él no es de este planeta, que él tuvo que fingir su muerte porque estaba amenazado de muerte. Y se me hace tan raro que en México existan 20 de las farmacéuticas más poderosas del mundo y no se dé a conocer si funciona esta terapia. ¿Por qué no se da a conocer? O sea, porque a mí me llegó así. Yo entendí todo esto gracias a como viendo mi simbolismo de Cristo, de cómo se me inculcó de alguna manera. Y Cristo tuvo que llorar y sangrar por el bien de la humanidad, por los pecados, por aprender algo de Él. Entonces, yo sentí como si esto ya se me hubiera enseñado antes, solamente era como redescubrirlo. Entonces, no sé, fue algo esotérico, no lo puedo describir. Entonces también me fijé en otras mitologías, como Prometeo, es como el mensajero de los dioses, y pues, no sé cómo, o sea, no sé cómo explicar todo esto para mí que se me presenta.
A ver, en resumen, está interesante todo lo que dice. Inició diciendo que se le hacía un milagro que el doctor hubiera estado aquí. ¿Por qué?
Pues porque empecé a creer en los milagros, porque todo lo que se me presenta se me reafirma más y más y más
Ya.
que debo pedir ayuda.
O sea, lo que el doctor ha comunicado o ha intervenido aquí, para usted es parte de ese cambio importante en su vida,
sí.
Y lo suma a ese milagro en su vida.
Sí.
Ahorita, gracias.
Should I give a response?
No es necesario. Un testimonio, ¿verdad?
Maybe briefly, because I don't really understand everything correctly, but for me, we have seen many miracles in our lives, miracle healings with our children and so on. But there's no real, that only for us, there's only one real miracle option that can come only from Christ, Jesus Christ, who saved us and who paid for our sins. You mentioned this, but He did everything. We cannot add anything to that. That is a perfect thing. So we don't have to go to horoscope or to many other things because they're unstable. We are body, with soul, and we have spirit. And the spirit is the most important. The communication with the invisible. But there's only one way to communicate with eternity and with God. That is only through Jesus Christ, because He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And only through me you can come to the Father. So, for me, the Bible is the absolute. And even, you can say, okay, scientists, the Bible doesn't agree with science or whatever. No, it's not true. It is outside of our time and also our space. And in this way, I think we can understand the universe, because we cannot explain these things. But there might be particular moments in your life where you might have an experience like this, and it can maybe open your eyes for the reality of the eternal God who is outside of time. And through Him only there can be a very eternity. It's not about what we do. We nobody of us is perfect. Nobody of us is without mistake. We make mistake every day. But we have the blood of Christ under which we can put themselves, you know. And this is for me always the comfort which I can get every time for the future also. I don't know about tomorrow or the years incoming, but I'm ready for the future. And this is only about relationship. And not about, oh, I do this and I do this to serve something. Nobody can do anything perfectly. You cannot deserve that. So it's only about relationships. That makes it so easy. That's all. But I'm not sure if I can give a total response on what you said. But I would stay away from horoscope and all these astrologies and these things, because the Bible definitely warns me against this. So, and there are reasons for that. So, but I mean, you have to follow your heart also.
The sound is vamos a salir porque desean todavía regresar para comba.
¿Puedo dejar el mochila aquí?
Pueden salir por aquí. Sí.